While most people would say that one school is significantly better than the other, when you look in modern day college football, Georgia and Clemson are pretty much identical.
You are Locked On Clemson, your daily podcast on the Clemson Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Locked On Clemson podcast. My name is John Bivens. I'm your host for the show. We are a credentialed media member, part of Clemson football, basketball, and baseball. Thanks so much for making Locked On Clemson your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast at and over on YouTube. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Here on Locked On Clemson, you're getting three things. You're getting all sports, all passion, all of the time, where we're bringing you everything you need to know regarding Clemson sports. Today is Monday, August 19th. We're going to be talking about how Georgia and Clemson, their comparison, how similar are the two schools. We're talking about QB matchups. What quarterback room would you rather have, Clemson or Georgia? And then we're going to end it with a recap of South Carolina games from last year. It's going to be a great episode. We're thankful for all of our sponsors. To get a full list of who those are, make sure to check out the episode notes. In modern day college football, Clemson and Georgia are identical. Look, when I say that, I can already hear through the screen. I can hear people being like, "Hush your mouth, blasphemy!" I can hear it, right? I can hear the hate. I can hear the disagreement. But hear me out. Clemson and Georgia in modern college football, giving the last 11 years, these two schools are identical. I mean, very, very similar. And I'm going to lay it out. I'm not just making this statement. I've got the facts. I've got the stuff to back it up. Let's start with this. Let's just start with the average, the AP rankings over the past 11 years. So where the two schools were finished in the last 11 year ranking. So starting in Clemson, starting 2013, finished 8th, 15th, 2nd, 1st, 4th, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 14, 13, and 20. You average all those together, and you get an average ranking of 7.5. So they're averaging, finishing the season 7th or 8th in the last 11 years. Honestly, I would have expected that to be higher, just given the success that we had, but we had some couple bad years, right? The past 3 years finishing 14, 13, and 20, and then that 15th in 2014 really hurt us. Now let's go to Georgia. Here's Georgia's in the past 11 years. 2013, and I will say this, they only give votes to the top 42. So what most people do, if you're not in those top 42 receiving votes, you give a mark of 50th. That's just what most places do. So that's what we'll do. 2013 finished 32nd, 14-9, 26, and 2016 they were 50th because they didn't receive a vote. 2, 7, 4, 7, 1, 1, and last year 4. That's an average of 13. So automatically, I know most of the people are going to say, most Clemson fans, I don't think will be like, "Oh, we're so much better modern day." I don't think that'll happen. I feel like a lot of Georgia fans will be like, "We blow y'all out of the water." Just look at the average finish in the rankings. You look at AP rankings at the end of the season where these teams finish. Clemson is almost half, like they're half of what y'all of Georgia's ranked. Georgia's finishing 13th, where Clemson's finished 7th or 8th. That's huge, right? I mean, so they're right there. That gives Clemson the advantage. But then you go farther. Look at national championships. In that time span, Clemson has 2. Georgia has 2. Look at top 6 finishes. How many times they finished in the Final Four rankings? Clemson has 6 of them. Georgia has 4 of them. So far, ranking AP rankings, Clemson has. Top 4 appearances, Clemson has. National championships, it's a tie. Are you starting to see this identical argument that I'm making? Let's go farther. All right, let's look at Heisman candidates. When you look at the Heisman candidates, this is people that finished the Heisman finalist in the Heisman Award, who were at the ceremony as a finalist. Clemson, past 11 years, has had 2. We had Trevor Lawrence and we had Deshaun Watson. I believe Trevor Lawrence should have won his. He did not. I really think he should have, but he didn't. Georgia has had 1. Last year, a couple years ago, they had Stetson Bennett the year that Caleb Williams won the Heisman. So all right, so there we go. Clemson again. Those are some rankings that are they're leaning towards Clemson, obviously. Clemson finishes better in all of those. Now let's look at Georgia's side. What is Georgia's argument that they're better than Clemson? One, they have recency bias. You look at just the past 3 years, drastically different. Clemson the past 3 years, 14, 13, 20. Georgia, 1-1-4. Arguably should have been higher than 4, but they lost that one game and then blew out Florida State in the bowl. Very different there, right? So recency bias, they have that. NFL players. These two schools put out higher NFL talent than almost anybody else in the nation over these past years, with first-round draft picks and overall draft picks and players playing in the NFL. You look at how much, though, Georgia has had more than 20 first-round draft picks in that time frame, and they've had over 80 overall draft picks in that 11 years. 20 for over 20 in first round, over 80 overall draft picks. Clemson has had almost 20 first-round draft picks and 60 overall picks. So Georgia gets the nod there, right? Recency bias, NFL players. And then the biggest argument is, what do they do when they play each other? In this time period that they've played, who's won more? Well, in that case, Georgia gets the nod again. In 2013, Clemson won 28-35 on a big offensive shootout. Georgia, I think it was actually closer than that. I think it was 38-35. I misspoke, but 38-35. 2014, Georgia won 45-21. That was a blowout. Those two started the season. In 2021, that was the defensive game. That was the game that neither offenses scored a touchdown. Georgia won on a pick six, and that won 10-3. So overall record is Georgia's winning 2-1. With that being said, Georgia has recency bias, has record against the school by one game, and has NFL players. Clemson has the average ranking in the AP poll, has the Heisman candidates, and has top 4 finishes. They tie in national championships. And I think, honestly, I'd give a tie at the coaching. I think their coaching is I would give it a tie. A lot of people would give it to Kirby Smart because the transfer portal. I would say Dabo's still at that level, and he's not taking transfers. So that's my argument there. But either way, you look at these metrics, these teams are identical. I think for a lot of average college football fans, there's going to be the argument of Georgia's so much better. They're at a higher level. That's because everything average is recent. The average fan doesn't look back to realistic statistics because everyone knows everyone can get hot for a couple years. What is the consistency? And consistency last 10, 11 years, these teams are identical. I don't understand where this recent argument of how Clemson is on such a lower level tier, how Clemson's so much worse than them. Guys, when it comes down to these teams, they are identical. They've had the same amount. They've had so many similar statics. They've had so many different rankings. They've had similar aspects in all of these. Some Clemson take advantage, some Georgia take advantage. The past 11 years, these teams have been two of the most dominant teams in college football, and they've been very identical in that aspect. The only teams I'd put above these two in the past 11 years would be Alabama, and that's just because it's Alabama. I think they're about to fall off without Nick Saban, but I don't think they're going to be bad. I don't think they'll be at the top level they're at, but Clemson and Georgia, they're going to be top tier for a long time, and enough with this argument that one school's so much better than the other. I know they're rivals. I know the fan bases don't like each other, but at the end of the day, these two teams are identical. But now, in 2 weeks, less than 2 weeks from now, we're going to see who's the better team now as these two teams face off in opening kickoff week. As we start getting ready for that, let's take a look at what team has better players in positional groups, starting with the quarterbacks.
This episode of Locked On Clemson is brought to you by FanDuel. Guess what, guys? I love sports. I love them so much, I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games, and the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. Whew, man, FanDuel has got you covered. FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app, dream up some bets anytime I'm in the mood. I'm telling you guys, it's at your leisure. You can be laying on the couch, twinkling your little toes, and you say, you know what? I want to drop a bet in this bad boy right now. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily. Yes, every single day. That's right. There's something for everyone, every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel is the official sportsbook betting partner of Major League Baseball.
Georgia has the upper hand when it comes to the quarterback position. Starting as we're getting ready for this season of the kickoff with Clemson versus Georgia, we're getting ready for this matchup between these two powerhouses, and it's going to be a great game. Georgia's overall favored, but I really don't think it's going to be a 14.5-point game. I think it's going to be closer than that. But as we're getting ready and we're gearing up for this game, we're going to start this new series where we're going to go through and see which team has the upper hand at each positional group. We're starting today with the quarterbacks. We just talked about in the first segment how these two in the past 11 years are very identical. Now let's look at this year specific. When we go through each position groups, we look at skill positions, we look at defensive line, we look at quarterbacks. Which team has the most upper hands across the board? That's what we're going to talk about. And today we're starting off with quarterbacks, where we believe Georgia has the upper hand at the quarterback position. Before we dive into why we think that, we got to talk about both these quarterbacks. So first, starting with Clemson's quarterback, we've talked a lot about him, but Cade Klubnik. Cade, I think, gets a lot of slack, and here's why. I think for some reason we have forgot the traditional system, the traditional progression of how quarterbacks take charge. Freshman starter quarterbacks used to be a rarity. That used to be something that didn't happen a lot. It used to be freshman year, you would back up someone. Sophomore year would get the keys to the program in your hands. First real time as a starter. Have some bumps because it's your first time. Then junior year is where you see who you are. Senior year, you play excellent, and you're mentoring a freshman coming up under you. That's kind of the classic progression of quarterbacks in college football. Cade is following that. Freshman year, he sat under DJU. He got to play at the end of the season because DJ was falling under expectations, played really well. And so last year was his first year as a starter. He played good. I think, am I saying he's great? He did not play great. Am I saying he didn't make mistakes? Not at all. He made mistakes. What I am saying is he did not play at the level that people are talking all this hate about. Like he hurt the team sometimes, but it wasn't like he wasn't competitive or he wasn't in the games. He's an overall good player. And I think now we saw him as a freshman backup. We saw him as a sophomore first year getting the keys. This year's the year that will truly tell who Cade Klubnik is. But for this series, we have to talk about where he is right now. Cade Klubnik, his overall stats at Clemson. His first year, he appeared in 10 games, but he only started 61 completions out of 100 attempts for 697 yards, 2 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Last year, started in all 13 games. He finished with a 63.9% completion rating, 2,800 yards, 19 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, 10 fumbles, 5 of those lost. Overall, he had a good year as a sophomore, as the natural progression of quarterbacks. That's the kind of year he had. Didn't have anything that's going to blow everybody out of the water, but he also had a solid year. It wasn't anything terrible. When you look at his recruiting profile, all of our recruiting, we're going to use the same website for both schools just to keep it fair. We're using 24/7. Cade Klubnik came out as a 5-star. 13th in the nation, number 2 quarterback, number 3 out of Texas, a 98 score. He's part of the 2022 class, committed in March of 2021. Overall, here's his main scouting report from high school that 24/7 put out. Said he was good height with athletic build. Mechanics have improved with reps and experience. Natural at the position. Competitive but calm. One of the most accurate passers in the class, whose ball placement and touch stand out. Good pocket awareness with functional athleticism to extend plays when necessary. Good athlete, lets loose in the field. Impressive improvisational ability. Varies velocity and touch deftly. Can make all the throws, whether over the middle, intermediate bullets, or field stretching deep balls. Outstanding production and elite performance in the 6A championship. Impresses in live game action and elite camp setting. Good report. Came out of high school as an electric 5-star recruit. Didn't get the nod that we wanted, or has not had the performance so far. But again, this is the year to truly make the decision. Don't be all out on Cade until this year happens. But that's Cade Klubnik. That's Clemson's quarterback. That's where they stand. Now let's go to Georgia. Georgia is led by a guy named Carson Beck. Carson Beck, his recruiting profile from 24/7, he's a 4-star recruit, 234 in the nation, 5 at his position, 33rd in the state of Florida. He is a part of the 2020 class. And here's what his recruiting profile said on 24/7. Classic pro-style quarterback, built with fairly filled-out frame, tall in-the-pocket passer, spray the football all over the field, solid mechanic, above-average arm strength with better accuracy, anticipatory thrower with ability to change speeds, play off platform, manipulate arm angles, elite processing relative to starting experience, willing to take risks, fiery competitive player, willing to get physical as a runner, quicker than appearance suggests with good instincts on the move as a runner. Yeah, so he put a great recruit. He wasn't as high of a recruit and nowhere near 240 something, 234th compared to 13th in the nation. So very different levels recruiting. His stats at Georgia, let's just be honest, he's had a lot better stats than Cade has overall. So his stats, 2021 passing, he only played in 4 games, only attempted 23 passes, had 2 interceptions, 2 touchdowns for 176 yards. 2022 played in a couple more games, 7 games, had 35 pass attempts though, 0 interceptions, 4 touchdowns. And then last year he was the starter for Georgia the season. He played in all 14 games. He had finished off. He completed 302 out of 417 pass attempts. That's around 75%. Had 24 touchdowns to 6 interceptions. Had 3,900 passing yards, so he almost hit the 4,000 mark. He had an excellent game, an excellent season last year. He's coming into his 4th year with the program, 2nd year as the full-time starter. Going to be electric. When you look at these two players, obviously, Beck gets the nod at stats. Beck gets the nod at touchdowns. Beck gets the nod at interceptions. 100% he's all there at turnovers. So as much as I love Cade, as much as I have faith in him and think this is going to be a breakout year for him, when you rate these two groups, these two quarterbacks for these teams, you've got to give the nod to Georgia with Carson Beck as an overall better player than Cade Klubnik, where they are right now. Based on what they have done so far, where they are right now. As future episodes, we're going to keep this going as we're going to dive into other programs, other positional groups, probably looking at halfbacks, looking at wide receivers, looking at linebackers, looking at all the different positional groups. But that is going to be that is going to be where we are standing right now. When it comes to the quarterbacks, Georgia gets the nod. Now let's go to another series we're in the middle of, where we're looking at games from last season and seeing what we can learn about this season's team. Today's game, we are recapping the game against South Carolina, where we learned our defense can absolutely carry us. Passion, drive, and patience. That's the formula for winning championships, and it's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and so much more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need and the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only. Available to U.S. customers. Go find the parts you need at ebaymotors.com. Our defense has the ability to carry this team even when our offense is sputtering. That's what we learned from the South Carolina game last year. And we saw that a couple times. We're in the middle of this series where we are looking at last year's games. We're looking at all the games from last year. We went through, rewatched the entire game, and then we come on and talk about it. And we see what can we learn from last year's team that translates to this year's season. We've done every single game so far. Today we are wrapping up the regular season and have one more game after this one. But we focused on South Carolina's. As we look at that game, let's just go through the game recap and what happened throughout the game. It was an exciting game, but it was a fun one to watch. The game started off in the first quarter, literally 14 minutes and 25 seconds left in the first quarter. South Carolina's quarterback threw a little pass over to the left. Some places mark it down as an interception. It wasn't. It was a backwards pass that ended up being a fumble. Kula Barnes scooped and scored 42-yard fumble return, and that would be the only touchdown that Clemson would score this game. Did not score an offensive touchdown. But Clemson went up 7-0. Then later on in the first quarter, Luke Doughty had a little 1-yard touchdown run from South Carolina on a great drive, 12 plays, 81 yards, 5 minutes, 37 seconds, tied it up at 7. And then the end of the first quarter, Jonathan Whites, who came into this game 1 for 6 at 40-yard field goals last year, came out, kicked a 50-yard field goal right down the mark to take the lead 10-7. In the second quarter, Jonathan Whites would again kick another field goal. Again, 1 for 6 entering this game, would go and hit a 49-yard field goal for a second of the game, almost second 50-yarder of the game, take a 13-7 lead. And then in the third quarter, early on in the third quarter, 13 minutes left, Jonathan Whites hit his third 40-yard field goal of the game to go up 16-7, and that would be the last score of the game. This game was a defensive performance. And I'll be honest, it was an offensive nightmare. Neither offense looked good. Like South Carolina scored a touchdown, yes. But on their offensive touchdown, they only scored it because a defensive player fell down. Like they ran a little end around, a little reverse. Quarterback handed off the halfback who pitched it to the wide receiver, ran around. They easily had him stopped, but unfortunately we had a player trip who tripped another guy, which allowed them to score. So that's why they scored an offensive play. But that was the only scores that happened. The only offensive score came on a run that shouldn't have been a touchdown for South Carolina. When you look at the two schools comparison between the two, Cade Klubnik did not have a good day. He went 15 for 27, hit the whopping 100 passing yards with 1 interception. Spencer Rattler, 16 for 32, 112 yards, 0 touchdowns. He says 1 interception. It wasn't. It was that fumble that we talked about. Rushing, Phil Maffa had a great game. Will Shipley got the starting spot, but Phil Maffa out-carried him. He had 19 carries for 89 yards. Will Shipley had 15 carries for 80 yards. Cade Klubnik had a great day running with over 50 yards as well. South Carolina's rushing, we held them pretty good. We held them to 57 rushing yards as a team, whereas Clemson had 219. Their top rusher was Mario Anderson, 13 carries for 35 yards. Receiving-wise, we only had 100 yards receiving. We're not going to have a standout receiver. Tyler Brown had 5 receptions for 40 yards. One of those was 39, which means his other 4 catches were 4 catches for 1 yard. I'll let you just imagine it because it's as ugly as you think it was. Our next one was Will Shipley, who was just getting the safety out routes when nothing else was open. 4 receptions for 32 yards. Xavier Leggett had 6 receptions, 68 yards for South Carolina. Like we talked about, Khalil Barnes recovered that fumble. Xavier Leggett was the one that fumbled it. And then Jason Kilgore fumbled it, but it was recovered. They didn't lose it. Our defensive side had a great game. We had 2 sacks, one by Ruka Roy, one by Barrett Carter. We had so many people tackles for a loss. Barrett Carter had 2 tackles for a loss. TJ Parker 2, Rook 1, Trey Williams 1, Peter Woods half of 1. It was a great game on our defensive side overall. And like we talked about our kickers, our special teams, Jonathan Whites came out 1 for 6 from 40 or more yard field goals, went 3 for 3 with hitting a 50-yarder one. Jonathan Whites himself scored 10 points. Our offense scored 0, and our defense scored 6. That pretty impressive. Like to see that. Love to see that. But that was the game. That was overall the stats. When it comes down to it, here's what you need to know. This game was another performance by Cade that was disappointing. Another one, our receivers didn't help him out. Another one, our offensive line did well on the rushing side. Passing side didn't provide a lot of protection. It was just a sloppy game overall on the offensive side. It was one where every time a play happened, every possession, there was something to be discouraged by. Every possession, there was something to be like, are we serious? Did that really just happen? Every possession, there was something like that. And we didn't score 1 touchdown. We didn't score 1 offensive touchdown all game. That's frustrating. But we were able to walk away with a win because of our defense. Our defense was electric. They gave up a total of 169 yards, 112 on the air, 57 on the ground. They played amazing. They were all over the field. They kept their roles nicely. The one mistake was on that one drive where we tripped our own guy and allowed him for a 1-yard touchdown run. We played an excellent game on the defensive side. And because of that, our elite defense provided us to win even with our offense playing like buns. That is something that I think we can still expect that level of play from our defense. What this game shows us is as we look to the season kicks off in literally 15 days from the day, or 12 days from the day. What we can expect to see from this is this. Our defense is going to continue being a top defense in the nation. They're shooting for the number one in the nation, and I think we can hit it easily top 5. When our defense is playing how they do, we can have games where our offense can sputter, our offense can struggle, our offense can kind of be a little bit underperforming or a lot underperforming, and we can still win because our defense is that good. Am I saying our offense doesn't have to play all season? No. There's going to be games where our defense struggles. Obviously, defense, nobody's perfect. No program is perfect. No side of the ball is perfect all season. We need our offense to play better. But if we have a couple games, 1, 2, maybe 3, where our offense struggles, our defense has the power, has the prowess, has the experience, has the talent to be able to carry us and even allow us to win, even with a terrible offense in that game. Our defense is that good. And that's what we should be encouraged at. Last year, that South Carolina game, it's a discouraging one to go look at. 16-7, not one offensive point on the board except for field goals. That's discouraging. That's something to be upset about. But be encouraged, because an elite receiver like Xavier Leggett, who's an NFL draft pick, going to start this year as a rookie in the NFL, we limited him to 68 yards, no touchdowns. A quarterback, Spencer Rattler, that was drafted. He's on an NFL roster right now. Limited him to 50% with 0 touchdowns, 1 interception, and barely over 100 yards. That defense is returning, and this defense can be one that can carry our offense when they're struggling. And with all that being said, that is going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Clemson podcast. Thanks so much for making Locked On Clemson your first listen every day. Now go check out the Locked On College Football podcast. From NIL deals to never-ending conference realignment rumors, Spencer McCaughlin gets you ready for an exciting season on the gridiron. You can find the link to Locked On College Football in the description, so you don't need to search. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This week, we're going to keep looking forward to that kickoff in less than 2 weeks. Keep going through this comparison with Georgia and Clemson. Make sure you're a part of our Locked On Clemson Insider program. What that is it allows you to have one-on-one conversations with us and access to bonus episodes. To find out more information of that, text Clemson to 864-252-1907. If you haven't, make sure you're subscribed to this podcast, wherever you get your podcast at, or if you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. That way, every single day, we can be your first listen here on the Locked On Clemson podcast. Make sure to check out other podcasts from Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. We can't wait to see you on the next episode. Until then, you keep that Tiger pride alive and roaring. And as always, go Tigers.